There. Alright, here's my introduction to how the hell the buff system in our game works. So, all the buffs, currently we only have 3, but that will be changing. Basically, in the player blueprint, you have an event that gets called whenever your buff gets activated, and it increments the stats. And then this I have it updating the game instance at the end, but the code has been updated, so we don't need to do that because it'll save the stats and everything whenever we go through a portal. So this is redundant, not needed, but I'm leaving it there for now just in case if it breaks something because it's currently working. Alright, so I will be initially showing you an example with the percentage buff, which is this one. And then I will walk you through making a new buff with this one, because this is the percentage damage multiplier that scales off of your base damage or flat damage, which this buff updates. So, without further ado, I'll just start from the beginning and work our way out. This is the base buff of damage flat that we will be making a new buff for. We'll leave that up to the side for now. The game instance is being used for this. The only thing the game instance does for the entire drop system is it gets this rarity map. This rarity map is literally just saying we have a 50% chance to get one of these two center values, which is like 1.0 and 1 point something for the multiplier. Then we have a 25% chance to get the two best tiers and a 25% chance to get the two worst tiers. I have it set up this way because it's just easy math in your head for like just quick balancing as you go without needing to actually do any systematic balancing test runs. And that's it. We're done. This is the drop table. We can ignore row name. That doesn't matter for now because it's the same as rarity. So rarity is rarity. That's the drop table that you just saw. Primitive and Ramshackle have a 12.5% chance to drop. Apprentice and Journeyman have a 25% chance each. And then Mastercraft and Ascendant each have a 12.5% chance each as well. So 50%, so it's 25% for the worst two, 50% for the middle, and then 25% chance for the best. This quality level is important. This is probably the most important thing that you don't even have to touch. Basically, Apprentice is the baseline. It is 1.0 for the value. This value alters the base value of the buff. So, if we look at damage flat, it has a base value of 5. So, if we get this buff at Apprentice, it will give us 5 base damage. If we get it at Primitive, it will give us 2.5 base damage. And if we get it at Ascendant, it'll give us 7.5 base damage. This makes it so all we have to do is change what the buff says here, and we're done. That's it. That's literally it, because these aren't changing. Unless we do a massive bounce patch, which is testing and damage numbers and fun spreadsheet stuff. And now this middle thing with drops, this scary looking line, is not actually scary at all. That is literally just, hey, which buffs can I spawn? This is an array, but it only has one item in it, and we're going to go change that. Next up is the percentage damage buffs, which is what these are, because I already have all of these made. This is a primitive percentage damage buff. It is 20%, which is the initial base, and then its multiplier is 0.5, which is this value right there. And then for the Ascendant one, it is 1.5, 0.5, 1.5, and both are staying at 0.2, which is the actual percentage damage increase. In the drop table, yoink. Now, the important aspect of this is this has a little bit of redundant code that will need to be updated, so to speak. I'm just not sure which path I want for it yet because the quality level is right here in the spreadsheet and in the drop. I need to get rid of one of those. That will be determined at a future date. So for now, if you make one before I update that, just simply set both to the same value. So if you set 1.5 for the buff multiplier there, or if you make it ascendant quality, make sure it's there. Which I will get to now. So for this, we go to content, A stuff, and then drop table. Here's the base random stuff for the drop table. Here's the drop table spreadsheet right there. This you don't really need to touch until after you have made the buff, which is just a drop-down click, which we'll do at the very end because chronological order. The chest you don't need to touch. Pick up base you do not need to touch. Pick up damage is already done. This is the percentage one. Pit damage flat is the one we're going to do. And then health is what I will be doing later. Which is the exact same as damage flat, because these aren't, I call these baseline buffs. They are buffs that only affect numerical values. They do not give the player character new abilities or alter abilities. They just change the numbers that the abilities or attacks do. So this is the base pickup for pickup flat. We'll just open it from here. So in drop table folder, we have pickup damage flat. We open it up. 5.0, 0 buff multiplier. This is set to 0 because if you don't do anything with this, you will always get 0 back whenever you try and pick it up. So if you get that, you'll know you did not set the multiplier correctly. Which is, very easy. You just type in here. But for the base one, you don't do that. So for this, we are going to right click it, create a child, and instead of child, we're gonna call it, I already just did a primitive to quickly run through it, so we'll do a apprentice one, or ascendant. We'll call it ascendant. For the naming schemes, for ascendant is ASC, which we will see when I open up these folders. So then we drag this into the ascendant folder. Move here. Please, please drag it into the correct folder first and then upload it to Perforce. Do not make it here, submit it to Perforce, and then move it. That sends errors and everything, and it's a headache to deal with. Just as a disclaimer there. So now, if we open up primitive, I have this one that I put in before I made the video, and then we have the ascendant one right here. Now, for the ascendant one, all we do is we put in the buff multiplier, and we're done. That's it. You don't touch anything else. There's no reason to touch anything else. It's all set up. So for primitive, it is 0.5. I will most likely remove it from this, so it's only dependent upon the drop table. But this also gives us more options for better in-depth balancing than just hard coding it to the drop table. So, yeah. Not sure yet. That's a conundrum. Anyways, so now both of those are set. So now we go to the drop table. We have a primitive one. We will add an entry that we will then go to pick up flat. It should only show these as well, by the way. Just saying. Doink. So the primitive one goes to primitive, by the way, prim to prim. And then if you click on the ascendant one, you add the array element. And we click on the ascendant option. And it has the 1.5 multiplier there too. So basically, because I remember why I put the decision off, for the quality level here, it sends it in as like a general overarching thing, but if we have it coded to the buffs individually, we can better tweak it. So if this one for balancing purposes needed to be 1.45, for example, instead of 1.5 for whatever reason, then we could do that. Whereas if we only go based off of this, it's like, yeah, you're stuck at 1.5. Good luck rebalancing the entire game because one buff is slightly breaking it because it's slightly too strong kind of thing. That's just meta math and players who like spreadsheets, but that's, yeah. We are going to save all because those are in the right spots now. And now, if we hit A and we touch this, this did all percentages, unfortunately. Whoever put in the sound, that nee, whenever we hit play, you get to listen to this every time. Whatever. It is. It should just, there we go. 3.75. We put something in the ramshackle tier. That's interesting. Anyways, one of my tasks is to make this actually update with correct information, basically. But here we have the 3.75, which is the base damage. So yes, we have the base damage there, and then we have the percentage damage. So that's literally you just make the buff, although that shouldn't be in ramshackle though. So ramshackle damage. How did that get a full number in ramshackle? I is confused. It's still 0.2. I know exactly what that is. It's not properly wiping. Okay, this will be a thing that I will have to solve. No, not editing this out because I can't be bothered. But basically, what happened there is, this will be a good learning thing in case if it happens to you while you're trying to make something and you're confused as hell. In the BP chest test, it gets the rarity that we get, and then it selects a pickup from that class. The issue is that the rarity it selected is like rounding up for whatever reason because it didn't properly wipe itself, or the code is set so like primitive and ramshackle could overlap if it rolls just the perfect rarity. I will fiddle with that so that doesn't happen. But basically, in the chest, whenever the player enters the radius of it, it plays its little opening animation or whatever. After it does its opening animation, it will set this, and then it will create the loot that then selects the rarity, which is all just math. This is where we use the game instance value to get the rarity of stuff. And then, yes. But the issue is that we are not setting the rarity roll. Okay, so that's why. Basically, the sum of rarity is not getting set to 0 at the beginning, because it should be 0 by base. And because it wasn't, yes, maybe not. I will look through that later. This is not the time to do that. Anyways, so it gets this rarity of it. It will then loop through it, decrementing it until it gets to the rarity that it was supposed to do, and then it does the rarity out, which will then go into here to select the drops by the rarity. It will then get the name, the row name of the drop table. It will get this row name depending on what rarity it rolled. And then it will do the out row of the pickup class, which is these. And then if it doesn't have a row, then you fuck something up somewhere. It will throw an error. Basically the spelling. Spelling is bad. Then after it does that, it will spawn the actors of itself, which then get populated into the UI, which is, if we go over here and player UI, select buff screen, this is where it will populate this X number and this stuff. Hmm. Yeah, so this is hard-coded text. I will be needing to fix that, but that's, yes, this is something I'll be fixing later. But basically it just gets the buff, it gets a direct reference to the buff it spawned, it gets information about the buff, and then it tells you what the buff is going to do. This needs to be almost entirely reworked. But that is one of my tasks I made for this week. All right, that's basically how the buff system works. For a quick little rundown, again, you go up to the chest, it does its loot roll that's based off of this value, the rarity map in the game instance. It does its special math to to determine which rarity in the enumeration it's supposed to pick. It will then select a buff out of this drop table based off the rarity it's selected. So if it selects primitive, it could be a primitive percentage damage or a primitive flat damage or a primitive HP buff whenever I add that one. And then it will add the buff to it, and then it will add the information of that buff to the UI screen here. And that is how the buff system works. To add a buff, you make a child of pickup base or pickup base. So if I was gonna make one called like jump to increase how high the player can jump, you could do that. And then you make a child of it for each of these rarities. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. There is 6. So once you make the buff, you have to make a child of it 6 times and just rename it to the abbreviation. So apprentice is app, ascendant is ASC, journeyman is jur, mastercraft is mass, primitive is prim, and ramshackle is ram. You just make it, and then you only change the buff multiplier in the actual buff, because I will most likely be removing it from this drop table. And that's all you gotta do. That was a long-winded monologue, but it was only 18 minutes, so that's better than I was expecting.